Hello and welcome to today's Commonwealth Club World Affairs program. I'm David Axelrod, founder of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, and it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest, my friend Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin served as a United States Senator from West Virginia from 2010 to 2025 and is the author of Dead Center in Defense of Common Sense. Born in Farmington, West Virginia, he entered politics as a member of his state's House of Delegates. Later he served as governor from 2005 to 2010. Since retiring from the Senate, he has, and I'm having trouble reading my script here, sorry. Since retiring from the Senate, he has shifted his focus to building Americans Together, an organization he founded with his daughter to develop support for centrist policies and candidates and politicians. A reminder, if you have questions for Senator Manchin, please submit them in the YouTube chat, and we will get to them later in the program. Senator Manchin, it's good to see you again.
Good to be with you, David. Appreciate it very much.
You have the healthy glow of a man who's no longer in the United States Senate.
You know what that looks like, don't you?
I do indeed. I do indeed. This book is it's a great read, and it's both a memoir and a kind of manifesto. And I want to get to both of those, and they're really related. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about how, as you do in the book, about how your upbringing in West Virginia has led you to where you are today in terms of your thinking about how politics should work.
Well, I was raised in a little coal mining community of Farmington, West Virginia, less than 500 people on a real good busy day. But it was a small area, but like most of rural America and rural Appalachia, and especially in West Virginia, where we have coal mining communities all in every nook and cranny in every valley. So being raised there, I was raised back in the time. I was born in 1947, and in the early 50s, there was no social nets for anybody. So I watched my grandparents, who were immigrants from one side is from Italy and the other side's from Czechoslovakia. They both came over in early 1900 to find a better life for their children, and my dad was one of five, the oldest. And they just expected you to give something back. It was always told to me, be careful what you say, because your words will have meaning, and it usually leads to action. You'll be held accountable and responsible for the words you speak and the actions you take. So do them both very cautiously and very respectfully. That's just the way it was. And being raised there, you knew right from wrong. And the whole area I was raised in, the whole state was a Democrat state at that time. But I'm told that we were a Republican state in West Virginia up and through the 20s until the Depression. And FDR comes in, and then off we go. And then John Kennedy comes in, and the state's just solid blue. But it was a centrist blue. It was a southern centrist blue. It wasn't a northeastern blue that would be a little bit more liberal, if you will. And,
I saw that caution with your words thing as you were searching for the way to say that.
Well, liberal, it used to be liberal, and now it's what do they call themselves now? Progressives.
Yes.
So
that's because liberal became a bad brand. So no, it became a bad brand. So okay. I think that's how that happened. But anyway, go ahead. Keep.
And anyway, so what happens is that then I was 35, Dave, before I got involved in politics. I was always around it, but I really got immersed and got so interested in 1960. I'm 13 years old, and the Kennedys are coming to West Virginia in force, and being a ethnic family themselves, being Catholic themselves, and being the same as us, we were a Catholic family. There wasn't that many in West Virginia. They had to break that barrier. And
yes.
And one time I was young, and I was downstairs working on the go-kart. We had little garage apartments, all we had. We didn't have much, but we had the same as everybody else, so everything was great. And then my mother said, come up, I think there's going to be some interesting people I want you to meet. And I said, Mom, I'm just all dirty. I don't really want to come up. She says, Joe, I think you should come up. It might be historical. So I go upstairs, and there's the Kennedy clan. There's Ted Kennedy and the whole crew, campaigning on, eating spaghetti. And I'm thinking they were very kind and very polite, but they didn't stop eating. So, so I was kind of then mesmerized by it. And I'm watching television one night, David, and I'll never forget this. My mother, we were watching, it had to be Walter Cronkite, said, "It's been said now, if John Kennedy becomes president, the Pope will run the country." And I said, "Hey, Mom, they don't know the Catholics we know."
You probably had a conversation with Ted Kennedy
many times
about that.
Yeah, many times. Ted remembers all of it. He loved West Virginia. He loved my Uncle Jimmy. Uncle Jimmy was called Brother Jimmy. And President Kennedy, or that time they called him Jack, senator. They said that my brother Jack once, he would tell Uncle Jimmy, he said, "Now, Jimmy," he said, "Brother Jimmy," he says, "your main job is to teach my little brother Teddy how to speak like you." Because my uncle was a terrific orator. Everybody, I mean, he could bring
and
the
he was
house
in politics
down.
as well.
Yes, he was. He was the Secretary of State, and he was State Treasurer. He was 92% approval rating. It was unbelievable, but he was a people's person. And the Kennedys loved him, and they took him around with him. So our family's kind of immersed in that, but that didn't get me involved. I went and I had a scholarship to play football at WVU, and I thought that'd be my ticket out of the coal fields. And lo and behold, I got hurt my sophomore year, and I was unable to continue on with my football career. So I got my degree, and my wife and I got married, and we raised our family in Fairmont, about 7-8 miles from Farmington coal mine. And I was in the business with my father. We had a carpeting business at that time. In '68, we lost everything. The store burnt down 1 week, and the next week, the number 9 mine blew up in '68. 78 miners got killed, and my uncle was one of them, and my classmates. I had 3 or 4 classmates. It was horrific. The town was just devastated. The whole community was devastated. But we bounced back like everybody else. Everyone pitched in and helped everybody get back on their feet, and away we went. And then about 1989, I got into my own business, a little bit of brokering in the coal industry, trying to clean up some of the old coal dumps and everything that we had, what we call is our waste coal piles, and want to get them because it was leaching into the water. We thought we'd get them cleaned up, and we found a way we could burn that and make electricity, but also help the environment. So I did that, and then I got involved in the political arena in 1982, and then I was a state senator from 1984 to 1996, ran for governor and got defeated in the primary and thought I was done. I said I tried, and then I ran. Then the people that really worked against me, some of the labor people were against me. They had a person at that time was much left, much more progressive in today's language than I ever thought about being. But a good person, just very progressive. And I could tell our state wasn't going that way, David. I could tell the Democrats weren't going that direction. But I didn't do a good enough job of getting my message out, got defeated, didn't say a word. She got beat in the general election. A Republican beat her, and that's an anomaly during those years. And then they came back and said, we'll get involved. And I said, guys, if we do it, we're going to do it my way, because I think what we've been trying to do all these years is not going to work anymore. We have to be competitive. We have to be watching out for the people, and we've got to make sure that businesses can survive also. So I became Secretary of State, and I ran for governor, got reelected, and then Bob Byrd dies in 2010. I had to make a decision. I made a decision. State's in good shape. I'm going to go and see if I can help my country and represent my state. Maybe if I could follow in Bob Byrd's footsteps, I could never fill his shoes, but I knew, because he's a good friend, he talked to me all the time, what to expect. He didn't have me prepared for what I got, David, because it was completely different than what I expected.
Let me stop you now, because there's so much in the narrative here, and we have a whole discussion to have about what you confronted in Washington and why, but some of what you learned growing up and saw since is very relevant to what's going on right now. And you very compellingly write about not just the value of work in terms of being able to support your family, but the meaning of work in terms of your own identity and how you see yourself and values. So talk a little bit about that,
David,
and how much that informs your politics.
Yeah. Well, I say you are who you are today, you and I both, and everybody that's watching or listening, by where you were raised, how you were raised, and who raised you. the little community I came from, everybody had to work. I didn't see anybody loafing, David. I never saw anybody loafing on the streets. Everybody was working. And then if someone couldn't work, they were physically not capable of working, everyone would help him. It wasn't, that was just a badge of honor that we said, by the grace of God, it could be us. And my grandmother took in everybody. But I always knew there were rules, and work was always part of the rule. So when I was 9, going on 10, I had to go up and start working with my grandfather. I was old enough to understand how to stock shelves, clean the warehouse, clean the garage, clean not the warehouse, and then he made me go over and clean the parking lot. And then people would come in and they say, "Hey, Papa, can I borrow your 5? Can I borrow your 5?" Could be anybody. Anybody would come by. My grandfather would loan anybody money. But there was a work element. He says, okay, he called everybody honey. He said, honey, go over and here's a broom and a shovel, clean the parking lot, and come back and get your 5. And half of them would say, okay, Papa, I'll be right back. And he looked at me one day and he said, don't worry, Joni, about half, take me up on it. So work was in it. My grandmother took everybody in. If someone needed a place to stay and were homeless, whatever you would call a day, back then, they just said, he's on hard times. He had hard times. Most of them had got into alcohol pretty bad. And Mama Kay said, okay, I got 3 rules. You can come stay with me and I'll feed you and take care of you. You can't cuss, you can't drink, and you have to work. So, man, we had some of the best painters and carpenters. These were people that really had a lot of skills but just got into alcohol. So one day I come home from school, I say, hey, Mama, we had names for everybody. We had Peg Leg Peggy, we had Wheelbarrow Willie, we had names for everybody. And I said, hey, where's Peg Leg? And she says, oh, don't worry about Peggy. She says, he'll be back in 6 weeks, honey. He's on the toot again. He got back on the bottle. Just like rotate every 6 weeks, they come back. So I learned all of that, but everything was around work. So only thing I've said, and I got chastised for it, I said, you know what? When I was governor, I asked Mike Levitt. I think you remember Mike Levitt. He was DHHS secretary. And I says, Mike, I don't have enough money to take care of what you're making me and what I need to take care of in my Medicaid system, my welfare system. I've got very sick, poor people that need my help. And you're making me give the same services to a very healthy poor person. If you'll let me train that poor person and don't penalize me, I can get them back into the workforce, take care of themselves. He says, Joe, okay. He gave me a waiver, and boy, I tell you, they came out of the woodwork against me, but it worked. And then they got rid of it.
The thing that strikes me is, and you write about it in your book, I mean, you use the word progressive with mixed regard, I think, is fair to say. But there's something that's happened with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party still sees itself as the party of working people, but it feels to me sometimes like as the party's become more of a metropolitan, college-educated party, it's begun David, approaching people. I can put it worse. We're approaching people more like anthropologists and missionaries and saying, we're here to help you become more like us.
That's exactly right.
And talk a little bit about that, about the disconnect between communities like yours and a party that sees itself as the party of working people.
Yeah, more and more, I grew up, and the Democrats, we never knew a Republican that wasn't our friend, and they were all my friends, and we liked them all, families and their kids, and that wasn't a barrier at all. The only thing about it, my dad used to say, and my grandfather, these are our friends that have maybe a little different idea how to fix the problem we have, and we all need to work together. That's what I've always heard. That's how I approached. That's when I come to Washington, I approached it the same way. I was asked in 2014 what happened to the West Virginia Democrats, and I said, they want to know what happened to the Washington Democrats. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, let me just tell you what they feel like. They feel like the returning Vietnam veteran. They did everything the country asked, and no one wanted them, no one treated them. They weren't good enough, clean enough, green enough, or smart enough. And they just said, the hell, they don't want us anymore. And that's really what happened. And I tried to tell them, I said, these people back home, they worked in mines, they've worked in factories. It's all working people that I knew. And they just said, the Democratic Party in Washington really spends more resources, time, and energy on able-bodied, capable people that don't or won't work than they do on us who do work. And then when coal started diminishing, going a different direction, they were left behind. They said there's no other jobs that came to give us an opportunity to continue to stay where we live and where we love and our culture. We lost everything. And that's when you heard the whole slogan about war on coal was because of that, Dave. They figured you want to get rid of us, okay. You want to change it, that's your right. But give us something else. Mm-hmm. And that's where that whole terminology, don't leave anybody behind, came in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it strikes me that the coal example is a good example.
It was changing.
There is a real concern about climate.
Sure. We all should be concerned.
Right, and we clearly have to do something about it because we view, many of us view it as an existential threat. Right. But if you've made a good living doing something and your parents have and your grandparents have, and all of a sudden that's going to go away, that's kind of an existential threat too. And
yeah, I mean, you have to weigh it. Everybody wants to drink clean water and breathe clean air. Trust me, we all know that. We just think, I always said this, you cannot eliminate your way to a cleaner environment. You can innovate it through technology, but you can't just say, I don't want this anymore.
But your point before was that you also need, this is why I was asking you about work, because I think, when you ask people, what's the first question you ask people when you meet them? You say, well, what do you do?
Yeah. We all, where do you work? Yeah, either way.
Exactly. And if the answer is you don't have an answer, that works on that. Yeah. That is a devastating blow to people.
It's so difficult, David. It's really so difficult. It means it is who you are as a person. And I always said, if you want to help a person have dignity and pride in their life and meaning in their life, help them get a job and help them get the skill sets to get a good job they can take care of themselves. And I've told them also, I've tried, David, to change the welfare system. And I mean change it because I've seen abject poverty. I've seen generational poverty. And the system basically, for survival, they have to have it. They can work up to a certain amount, let's say $25,000. I'll use that, if they have children and family. If they go a penny over that $25,000, they start losing all their, a lot of their services. And that makes no sense at all. So they'll basically stop working and earning and paying taxes at that point, and sometimes they'll go on under the table and work, or it just basically throws them back in to this, well, I'll teach our children how to do it and our grandchildren how to do it. This is how the system's going to work for us. And I said, why don't we change the cliff to a slope and allow people to keep some of their services that they need as they work themselves up to a mean wage, which is an average wage of the state you're in. Our average wage is less than $50,000. So couldn't they get some assistance so they get up there? When they get up there, they'll take care of themselves. They just can't be dropped off cold turkey at 25 and say, okay, the rest is on you. And they'll tell you, well, unless I'm making 40 or 45, I can't do as well as I did 25 or less. It's a horrible, horrible catch-22, and no one's talking about it. We need a slope. You need a slope, not a cliff.
And I've heard you wrote in the book that people want hands up, not handouts.
They do.
They also don't like bailouts as well. I mean, my sense of folks who are in the middle is that they don't like handouts to people at the top. They don't like bailouts to people at the bottom. But we live in an economy today that's changing so quickly.
Yeah.
And, we're going to see another jolt when AI comes on in the next few years, and all these jobs are going to disappear. What do we do about that?
Let me just tell you one thing, and I got chastised for quite a few different things, as you recall, in the BBB and all this and that. And I tried my best to look. Every time my approach to legislation was this: if you came to me, David, I want to get to yes. You come to me because you had a problem or a concern, or you've seen something that needed fixed. I want to get to yes. But I've got to also factor in, I got to go home and talk to the people that I represent. And is it within the boundaries of my oath to the Constitution to protect and defend? That's how I weigh things. And some of the things that would happen, they say, Joe, child tax credits. And I said, listen, I want people, and I can tell you, people that are in that 25,000 up to 75,000, I've seen mostly single females with children having a hard time. They can't do both. They're the ones where we should be dedicating our services and helping them. And I said, but I can be honest with you. if you're sending checks to people that aren't working, sitting at home, the incentive would be go to work and we'll help you take care of your children. If you give them money staying home, they're not going to do anything. And I just couldn't get there. And people just jumped all over me on that. And I says, I'm sorry. The way I was raised, and someone wants to help me, I got to help myself a little bit too. And that means get up, and there's plenty of jobs every place, especially after COVID. My goodness, there's job wanted everywhere. And
Yeah, well,
I really got hit pretty hard on some of those things. And I just told him, I said, listen, I want to help everybody who needs help, I'll guarantee you. And I'll help them get themselves up to where they can take care of themselves. But there has to be a work element involved. That's all I can tell you, because they're not going to respect it. It's not going to have any value to them if it doesn't.
yeah. I just want to make clear one thing that I was saying before, where I was leading was there never was the discussion, whether it was on trade or climate. There never was an honest discussion with people about how those who were displaced were going to be, how it was going to be squared for them so that they had work, that was, on trade, there was the trade adjustment assistance that never really materialized.
The Inflation Reduction Act that we put in, we did that after the BBB was dead and gone.
Yes.
I was looking at energy security. We didn't have any energy. I mean, we weren't producing energy, I knew we had to. And I was chairman of Energy Committee, and I'm thinking we got serious problems. Then Ukraine war breaks out. You have Putin, who declared a war on Ukraine. No matter what anyone tells you, they are the aggressor. Mm-hmm. He is absolutely vile, Putin, and something has to be done there. But they declared war, and they used energy as a weapon. Mm-hmm. They cut off our NATO allies, and I kept saying we better do something. So my staff and I started writing a bill no one knew about. And we wrote all the energy portion of the IRA. And what we did is we said, we're going to produce the energy that our country needs, better and cleaner, using fossil with technology than anywhere in the world. And we're going to invest in all the technology that we need to have a carbonless future. That's what we were doing. And I know a lot of that's been kind of scrubbed right now and this and that, but I can tell you we were in the right direction, and we have produced more energy for our country, becoming energy independent.
Well, look, you're an expert on this. You were chairman of the committee, the Commerce and Energy Committee. Let me ask you about what's going on right now, because the president has taken a position that that alternative energy, wind, solar, should be reversed, that we don't need those. And, he is very much promoting fossil fuels. But where we live in this time, it's not just the world situation. It's that when AI comes on board, the needs for power are going to be enormous. Don't we need all these sources of energy?
We don't have the grids. Our grid cannot support what our demands and our needs are going to be. I can assure you. So we're trying everything we can to get up to speed. Nuclear fusion is going to be the answer for the future. I think that's where you're going to get most of your carbonless and get plentiful fuel, which we call dispatchable, which means it'll operate 24/7, whether the sun shines or the wind blows. We need wind. We need solar. We need every bit of energy that we can produce. And I think what they're doing is looking at cutting subsidies and credits and this and that. Well, you have to mature. Okay, wind and solar has been pretty much matured. The photocells and things of this sort are much more efficient and effective than they had been in the past, and they can compete. But just to be used and saying, I'm not going to use it at all, and you're going to be penalized if you use it, is absolutely wrong. You cannot take that approach. It needs to be part of the grid. And I can tell you, the cost of energy, if you want to know what poverty really is, you look at an energy-starved area, whether it be a country, whether it be a community where the prices get so high they can't afford it, you're going to have poverty. Energy basically will get you out of a poverty because it'll get you to where you can produce and be productive and have products that you can basically make a living with. So we've got to have competitive energy. What happens, you have most of the pollution is coming from Asia with what China, even though China is doing an awful lot in renewables, an awful lot, as you can see, wind, solar, nuclear, everything they're doing. but they have not backed off of coal or any other of the fossils, and they're pumping it to it. India, coming on strong with their demands, is using an awful lot of fossil. We could at least, with our trading, with our trading policies and our, the whole thing about tariffs should be, we'll give you incentives to our market if you use a new technology. So if you want to use coal, you better be using scrubbers, low NOx boilers, baghouses for mercury, cleaner than ever before. And if we can get sequestration worked out, but I got to be honest with you, there's a lot of people that didn't want sequestration to find us the CO2, we can sequester it, because then if you find a cure, they'll continue to mine and burn coal. I understand where they're coming from, and there'll not be another coal plant built in America. But we have to still make steel. We still have to still have the products that we need to take care of ourselves, our defense, and our economy. And we can't rely on China. We let China take over most of the market, and it was most of the environmental market that we didn't want to do anymore. So here's America. As long as out of sight, out of mind, you go ahead and do it. If you want to go ahead and get rare earth minerals out of Congo and enslave people there and families, go ahead. I just want a battery to run my car. Well, let me tell you what the price is paid, and the environmental price is paid for that battery that you enjoy in your EV. So we have to be realistic about and be able to do things in a much better way. And that's what the IRA bill did.
You write a lot about, so much of this book is about the things that need to change in order to create an environment in which you feel that the what used to be called the silent majority of people in the country would be heard. And one of the things that you trace the current sort of dilemma to in our politics is the role of money and the Citizens United ruling in
Just
2010.
awful. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, what happens is you see the money. Before there used to be caps on money, how much you could give to each candidate and who could give it, and it had to be all transparency to everything. I mean, we had to know where it was coming from. I said, if you were just a rich person yourself, you could spend all the money you want on yourself. You just couldn't take it from all your rich friends and hide it so they wouldn't know they're helping you in this and that. Well, Citizens United opened up the floodgates to where businesses. And I really said this, if they'd looked back before that, and if someone would have sat down with Labor and Chamber of Commerce and said, here's the new rules as far as how we're going to participate in politics. And what happened, Chamber of Commerce was always upset about Labor having PACs and everything and being able to bundle more money, and was able to have an unfair advantage in the financial end of it. And they wanted to be able to get into it also, but they couldn't, because until Citizens United, corporations and things of that sort couldn't be involved at all. But that changed completely, and now you have 501c4s. They can run a PAC, and someone can run a PAC on your benefit. You can't be organized or know anything about it, supposedly, but you know how that, a wink and a nod, and that's pretty much gone too, David. And when you see one person can give $290 million for one candidate, that person's going to have some insight. They're going to have a key to the door.
And what does that mean in terms of what happens in the United States Senate in Washington?
Well, what happens there, they're afraid to take it. Basically, get the courage that you should have to do the right thing when they know they can put so much money against you. You can say one thing tonight, and by tomorrow they'll be spending a couple $1 million just beating the living crap out of you because you didn't stick with the party line or the person that was in power or this or that or whatever. And then if you're not a good enough Democrat or Republican, and the way they control primaries, David, they'll just go ahead and target you. And they'll say, I'm sorry, David, you're not voting with us enough, and we need another good Democrat or another good Republican that'll stay with us 100%. Even though you're there 90%, that 10% really hurts me, you're not there. Well, you know me, you're lucky if I'm going to be 50% with you, because if it makes sense, I'll be wherever I can make something better. And I said, I've never let the enemy,
perfect be the enemy.
Perfect be the enemy of the good. I've never done that. And that's why Mitt Romney and I got along so well. Mitt would say, hey, Joe, you got to do this, you got to do this. He had so much knowledge, and he had so much support on things, and we talked about subject matters. And then he just kept pushing. And then finally we just said, okay, we got to go. And I'm thinking he's going to say, well, I'm not going to do it. And he'll say, okay, I'm with you. And I'm thinking, my goodness, you just beat me up for 30 days. He said, I want to make sure we move the ball forward. He said, we're not going to be perfect, but it's better than what we had, so let's go.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Now you're both out of the Senate now.
Yeah, I know. we could sit down with anybody and talk to them and get people together. We always had 8 or 10 of us that I consider that would always meet in the middle, always meet in the middle. And
They often met on your houseboat.
you know what? I bring them down to the old trawler here, to Almost Heaven, and they've had it. And we come down, we have a glass of wine or a beer or whatever, and we have something to eat. And I always try to bring, if I brought 4 down, if I bring 4 Ds, I bring 4 Rs. If I brought 3 Rs, I bring 3 Ds. I said, don't come unless you're bringing a buddy from the other side.
Why did you live on a house? I always thought this was symbolic of who you were, because you lived on an island.
I don't think of it that way. Maybe subconsciously you might be right. I just, for some reason, David, I just didn't want to be anchored down here.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want this place to think it owned me. I was still West Virginia. I wasn't Washington, never have been Washington. And I think on this boat, at any moment, I can untie the lines and I'm slipping away. You won't even see me go. And I just felt like I just had that freedom.
You talk about how divisive our politics are now, and you trace some of it to redistricting, some of it to the money issue we just
Well, the money
discussed.
issue, like I said, unless you change the money, you're not going to change the ways. If you think the parties have become extreme, their business model's doing just fine. The more I can make you afraid of the other side, to the point you almost hate them, and you just can't stand them, you won't talk to them, you won't even try to interact with them, then that's fine. My branch, because you know what? Those dollars keep coming, boy, and they see we're fighting and standing up and we're fighting for what we believe
So
in.
let me ask you about this, because the thing that you don't talk much about in the book is social media. But it seems to me that social
on it
media,
now.
the business model of social media is exactly what you say. Their business model is to keep people online, and their insight is that the thing that does it is anger, outrage, resentment, and conspiracy theories, and they figure out what your hot buttons are, and their algorithms just punch away to keep you engaged.
Yep.
We have a perverse set of rewards both in our politics and our media.
If we don't really put guardrails, if we don't go back and take away Section 230, which gives absolute immunity, which is unreal. Just you and I and every citizen have the free
You're talking about the
speech.
provision that gives these platforms immunity for the things that they put on their platform.
That's exactly. And I'll guarantee you one thing. They will monitor, because they'll be held accountable and responsible if a kid learns and gets radicalized, or if a kid basically commits suicide, and on and on and on. Right now, they're immune from that. You're not immune from that, from free speech. If you create havoc, if you create an unrest, if you create violence and a riot, you're going to be held accountable. That's the free speech, but you better be careful what you're saying. And if you slander someone, they'll take you to court and sue you. They're allowed to, because those are things. Free speech has guardrails on it. Can't we at least have the same guardrails on the social media, where most people are getting their information from and how they're communicating, as we do on free speech? And no one's talking about that. Last week, President Trump said, after he was talking about the young man who is now,
Charlie Kirk.
Charlie Kirk's assassin.
Yes.
And President Trump was talking about, he come from a good family, and he's talking about him, very bright as can be. And all of a sudden, by the time he's 15, he got radicalized on the internet. It wasn't any group or cult or anything. It was the internet, where kids are basically getting their information and just continue to pour it on. And I said, well, Mr. President, if you've identified it, which I think you're 1,000% right, do something about it. I'll tell you, if you take the lead on this, we'll throttle that back, and we'll put guardrails on, and it'll change the content of what you see on all these social platforms. And if you don't do something pretty darn quick, when AI comes on, God help us all, Dave, you won't know who's talking to you. You won't know if that's your face or if that's your family person's face. You just won't know. It's just unbelievable what's going to happen. And we just dilly-dalled around. We haven't done a thing. It's going to get much worse. And I'm asking President Trump right now, please, Mr. Trump, please, Mr. President, you're our leader. Fix this. You have legislators that will do it. I know they will.
What is your feeling about you governed under Trump? You were in the Senate under Trump in his first term. Now you've seen the first 10 months or so, 9 months of his administration. It seems different. I mean,
A lot different.
Yeah.
A lot
So,
different.
I mean, you talk about fear. He once told Bob Woodward that Bob Woodward asked him how he would define power, and he said, fear gives you power. And you talk about the fear of legislators. You've got a lot of colleagues in the Senate on the Republican side who you know very well and who you've had long conversations with.
I talk to them still yet.
Probably on that boat of yours.
Yep.
And yet they're pretty silent on stuff that they don't agree with.
I know that they know it's wrong. I know they know it's wrong. And my buddy Tom Tillis, he just, enough's enough. It's a shame because I don't know. I'm old enough. I'm able to time out. I've been at 40. Someone says, "Why'd you quit? You couldn't get reelected. You couldn't." I said, "I never worried about getting defeated, David. Never ever. If I could get my message out, and if I worked, I didn't think anyone could outwork me. They're not going to work as hard as they're not going to communicate. I think as well as I can communicate and talk to the people back home. They know me. They've known me forever." And just got to be honest. You got to shoot straight with them. I could have done that. I didn't have the desire to keep doing that. And at 78 years old, I didn't want to be carried out of the place. I've watched too many of my colleagues that just weren't functioning as well as they should have and didn't leave on top of their game. I feel like my game is still okay. But, Mother Time will will catch up with you. You can't outrun her. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that happen with our friend Joe Biden. But it's just a situation we're in right now, and I'm just hoping they stand up and say enough's enough. It's not who we are. You have free speech. You're not going to throttle back the press. And I said I've always taken constructive criticism very well. And you know what? Constructive criticism has helped me quite a bit. And a lot of it came from the press. The press, being as astute as the press is, they would point out your flaws. And rather than get mad, it hurts you a little bit, it upsets you. Sometimes they say some cruel things. But you start looking at yourself, am I really? Okay, can I get better? Then I would always reach out to whoever the press person was and says, I know what you said and I appreciate it. I know it was a little bit harsh, but I still appreciate it because it made me take another look at myself and recollect, am I getting my message across right? Or I must not because you're thinking something different. I've always looked at that. That's good. And now he wants to throttle that back, and you can't talk about the military, Department of Defense.
Or the president himself. I mean, he said last week that people should be prosecuted who are critical.
That's wrong, so wrong. And, Ted Cruz, I've known Ted for a long time. I've served with him for many years. We get along fine. Ted's a little different. You know that. He's very smart and very articulate. I can't say it better than what Ted said. What goes around comes around. And if you think you're curing this, if you think by stacking the deck in Texas, by redistricting, I guarantee you what goes around will come around. And I'm begging, I hope that in California they don't do it. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger is leading the charge there on the referendum, and because you can't stop it. You just can't. It's awful. But what they should be doing is making sure they're able to have an accurate, proper way with people that unbiased, if you will, commission. And I would use computer models, have the people involved in commission redistricting, have them come up with a plan, have the computer look at a plan and said, you're 5% out of the window. You can do better than that to make sure there's income equality. There's basically territorial that makes it much easier for a person. You don't make them go 50 miles one way in a rural area because you wanted to get an extra Democrat or Republican. Those types of things have got to stop.
Yeah, I understood. But the people who have to stop them are politicians who run on those maps.
I know. Well, the referendum, they have a referendum there.
In that state. Well, California has, some of the features that
I love it. I love what they're doing. I think they hit a straight
California and
open primaries, and basically you have to have a 51% simple majority before you can win the office. That's all very good.
But getting back to the president for a second, he is using both the regulatory agencies and the Justice Department in a way that we've not seen.
I've never heard it. I never thought anyone would ever try to use the Department of Justice as their own Department of Protection, or their own Department of Defense, or their own department.
Or vengeance.
Yeah, vengeance. We don't. That's not. when you take an oath in public office to protect and defend the Constitution, it's not to protect and defend me so I look good, or basically you can't say a word about me. I always said this, David. I played a lot of ball and different things and been competitive most of my life. If I'm competing against you, I want to beat you. I really do. I'm going to work hard to be better. And if I was playing basketball or something, I want to beat you. I just don't want to defeat you, because if you get to the point where you just give up and you're just demoralized, you won't even participate anymore, I guarantee you, I'll go down too. I won't be on top of my game. You're coming back all the time making me better. We're both going to improve our game. I assure you that. And it's no different in life. It's no different in politics too.
Yeah.
You get
I think the fear of the people. I hear what you're saying about California. The argument back would be that given the way in which these institutions and rules and laws and norms are being sundered, that if there's no if the deck is stacked and you can't elect an opposition house because of the things that are being built in to try and prevent you from doing it, then you're emboldening even more encroaches on democracy.
David,
in our institutions.
let's look at both parties right now. The Democratic Party, and you have Bernie and AOC, and Bernie, he's a confirmed socialist, and AOC, I don't know I know she's a very progressive person, and I know Bernie pretty well. I don't know AOC that well. I've met her a couple of times. They're going clear to the left, having these different rallies. They're going around the country, and they're getting good turnouts. And they think, well, this is the way. This is where the Democratic Party is.
He was in West Virginia, I think, wasn't he? In West Virginia recently?
He came down through West Virginia, sure, and all that. And there's some people that turned out. That's all good. Let me just tell you what the facts are. Since the November election of 2024, the Democratic Party has lost at least 160,000 people that aren't registered as Democrats anymore. They left. The Republican Party's picked up at least 200,000. Is all the records that we're following. So if that's the way the party is going, and they think that's the way that moderate Democrats like myself who left, I'm sure I'm one of the 160,000, then something's wrong. It's not working. It's not where the country's going. Can't you find the middle ground? And I'll give you a little bit about a middle ground. Wouldn't it be better just to say we made a big mistake on the border? We could have controlled it better. We could have secured our border better. And then say, Mr. President, Democrats would say, we want to work with you. We want a secured border, and we made a mistake. Can you work with us on legal immigration? Can we just get a good immigration policy that works for our country, that keeps us vibrant and keeps us an influx of people, the bright people hardworking, the same as our ancestors came, the same reasons.
Right,
we have the country we have.
Yes, I'm the son of a refugee.
They can't do that. They can't ask to do that when they're just absolutely just at war.
Actually, I hear a lot of Democrats saying that now, but let me ask you this, because we started earlier talking about the economy, and you and I both have lived the American dream, being sons of immigrants. Right. But what you hear from people, and it's not unfounded, is our kids are not going to do as well as we're going to do. Our kids are not doing as well. We are working harder to keep our heads above water.
Right.
And
that's why people like Bernie and AOC is kind of attractive to some people. We're
do they not have a point that if you work hard, you ought to be able to get ahead? If you work hard, you ought to be able to afford health care. You ought to be able to afford housing.
Yeah.
Isn't that, I mean, is that, I don't know if that's socialism. Socialism to me is more like the president saying, I want to seize I'm going to take a piece of your company, or I'm going to decide whether your company lives or dies based on whether you give me, that state control of the private economy to me is a frightening prospect. I don't think that's what they're talking about.
No. Everyone's chasing, it's all about the shareholders. What's the return on for our shareholders? We'll make some tough decisions. We'll close a couple of plants. Before, people felt like they had a moral responsibility. They were part of the community. They were fabric of the community. And plants, I would say corporations, when you and I were growing up, probably had a conscience. They had values, okay? They were part of the family. And they would make decisions based on what they thought was best, not only for their customer and people that invested, but basically the people that worked with them and in the communities they were invested in. That's not the case anymore, David. wherever the return on the shareholder is the best is where they're going to go. If you have to close 10 plants and 10,000 people are gone, that's where we're going to go.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, people are saying, what happens to AI? AI could wipe out
exactly
tremendous
so
workforce.
so in some ways, what I'm listening to you, and I think if Bernie Sanders, and I don't speak for him, but if he were here, that'd probably be a point of agreement between
Oh,
you.
yeah. Bernie and I agreed on some things. On high drug prices. I said wherever we can get lower drug prices, we should do it. We've got PBM, pharmaceutical benefit managers, middlemen, who make all the money, and we pay the high price for it. Our VA, the only thing that we have in this state and our country right now, the Veterans Administration can buy drugs lower than anyone else. They don't go through PBMs, but Medicaid and Medicare sure do. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's wrong. So wrong. And the prices we're paying. So Bernie and I agreed on bringing drugs in from Canada. They don't have PBMs, and why shouldn't Americans get lower prices? So things like that made sense. But
let me ask
tell
you
you
a
where
question.
Bernie and I disagreed. Let me tell you one thing real quick.
Yeah.
Free tuition, free colleges, and free this and free this. Okay, I said, Bernie, listen, the difference of you. And I said one time jokingly, I said, Bernie, if you had free college right now, my son's 40 years old, he'd still be in college. He liked it so much. He'd have never left. And he laughed. I said, Bernie, he said, oh, Joe. I said, no, Bernie. The difference is this. My son messed up at first in college, didn't do well, he played and this and that. And then I got to the point, I pulled him out. I said, okay, Joe. I said, my son, I said, okay, honey, here's what we're going to do. We tried it your way. That's the way I thought, well, you're going to college, I'm going to pay for that. But I can tell that you didn't take it seriously. You're going to graduate. You're going to take out a loan. You're going to basically pay right now, and I will pay it off once you finish. You don't finish, it's your loan. You finish, it's mine. And he graduated on time, did well. So I told Bernie, I said, Bernie, if you want to get people, good degrees, you want to get people in community colleges that have good skill sets, then let them have the loans that we give, because government-backed loans. Let them have the loans that they need, and those loans will be paid off when they finish. You understand, most of these kids drop out by the time they're a sophomore. Mm-hmm. And they accumulate lot of debt because they borrowed everything that they were able to. Wow. There was no fiscal responsibility. There was no fiscal management whatsoever or education that they had to do. And if they had parents had income, they said, this is how much money that you can receive and you can borrow from the government to go to school. And they said, $12,000 a year, give it all to me. We only need 6. I want the 12.
I have some management responsibilities here, and that's to get to some questions before we finish. So we ought to do that. And one of them is, do you believe the filibuster strengthens democracy or prevents necessary reforms?
I believe the filibuster is the holy grail to the democracy that we have today. If there's one thing I do know, and Bob Byrd beat it into my head, and if you go back into history, why do we have a bicameral? Why did we have a Senate, and why did we have a House? If that was the case, if it was all meant to be the same simple majority, why don't we have a unicameral, which is one body? Why would you have 2? And they designed, and I think that George Washington even said the House is going to be hot as a firecracker when they pass something, because it'll come from one side of the political agenda or the political field. Goes to the Senate, he's got to calm it down. It's like a hot cup of tea going over to the Senate with a saucer to cool it off so we can drink it. The difference is this. Tell them to think about this. Who had to tell 13 colonies after 1789 what type of government you have, and then explain the type of government having a House and a Senate? And you had to tell big bad Massachusetts and New York and Pennsylvania and Virginia, guess what? Everyone's going to have 2 senators, 2 representatives. And someone from Massachusetts says, you're telling me that Rhode Island and Delaware, those teeny little places that doesn't contribute to this economy at all, is going to have exactly the same vote that I have? Someone said, yeah, I don't want the big guys beating up on the little guys. This is called the United States, not divided states. So senators could talk forever, unlimited. So 1789 to 1917, they could go on and on and on. They had to stop it and shut it down because we were trying to provide the provisions we needed for World War I, and we had isolationists that just kept filibuster. So that's where the cloture vote came in at 67 votes, and it went down to 60 in 1965, I believe, or 75. Anyway, that's the only thing that we even look and talk to each other. If it wasn't for that, I guarantee you, it can't get much worse. And we have it. So people are saying, well, it hasn't helped. It has helped. Can you imagine where the Democrats would be today if it wasn't for the filibuster? If I would have voted to get rid of the filibuster along with Kirsten Sinema, there was only the two of us. And you know what? When Trump was there, he wanted to get rid of the filibuster, and that's why him and Mitch McConnell fell out. Mm-hmm. And he kept calling Mitch. He said, "You got 54 senators, Republicans. Give me what I want." It doesn't work that way, Mitch said. We got to have 6 more Democrats. Well,
yeah, we're about to have it appears a shutdown, a budget.
It's ridiculous.
Shutdown. But I wonder,
never shut down.
I wonder if the president's not going to take another run at the filibuster as and use this as a pretext.
They're nibbling around it right now. That's the problem. And I've called my friends up there. I said, guys, don't. So you're playing with fire right now. You're playing with fire, and if you override the parliamentarian, when she rules you out of it doesn't fit within a reconciliation. They're all trying to go to reconciliation.
That's where that bypasses.
Bypasses the whole system. It goes back to 51. It's only so that's where Schumer went. That's where Joe Biden went, and I begged him not to. And I said, I won't do it. I knew exactly what was coming. And that was a big reason why the BBB wasn't going to go anywhere, because we did it. What happened? Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, I just want to make sure we get some more of these questions. And
filibuster. I believe the filibuster is the only glue we have to get back to any type of regular order. But they're going to have to start taking back the responsibility from the chairs of committees to get some power back and quit giving it to the top, what we call the 4 corners, which is the House and the Senate, both leaders of the Democrat and Republican Party in the House and Senate. Their staffs in the 4 corners at the end of the year make all the decisions. It's horrible.
What will it take for a centrist coalition-style presidential ticket to succeed, like what the No Labels organization attempted in 2024? And I know you spoke with them. You thought about running.
I was very much involved
on that ticket. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been involved with No Labels since they began in 2010. And I support them because these were people that were prominent Democrats, prominent Republicans that just said enough's enough. They're not paying any attention to us anymore. Once they get in Washington, they do what they want. So I thought, and I saw all the polling, and this country was ripe to have a person who had been a former Democrat, maybe, or had been a former Republican to form a team, a president and vice president run as a team, to show how we could have joint leadership, work together, and have commonality, not divisiveness continuously. And they were hungry for that. But the system is so rigorous as far as hard to get through, David, that, my God, I mean, they spent millions of dollars and got on, I think, 16 state ballots. But I didn't want to get involved if I was going to be a spoiler and be blamed for whoever won or whoever lost. Mm-hmm. And that was the only reason. Other than that, I'd have loved to get on the stage and talked about things that I thought made common sense, whether it be the work ethic and be about our responsibilities and opportunities for education, how our health care could be better, and high prices of drugs and everything in between, and our geopolitical standing around the world and what we had to do. A good neighbor is a good neighbor. A good neighbor doesn't beat the living crap out of you, take advantage of you, and says, boy, I still really need you as a good neighbor. I want to be a good neighbor. Well, you know what? You're going to have to prove it to me now.
What are the 3 things that you would do? You write about them in the book. What? Just name 3 things that you would do that you think would materially improve the system. You mentioned one, redistricting.
Money. Well, first of all, the money is the biggest thing you've got. Mm-hmm. Redistricting would help from that standpoint, but how the primaries, open primaries, would not allow the strength of a party in Washington go back and dictate who could or who could not, and already preordain somebody you wanted because they were a loyal subject, okay? And that would change things immensely if you could do that. The money, bringing it down, put caps on money, the outside money, no more dark money, that would help tremendously. And also, I believe that the state and the country is ripe for term limits. I never had, David, 15 years ago, I was in a public hearing, and not a public hearing, but a public gathering down in southern West Virginia, and a beautiful old lady stood up and said, "Joe, I wish you were for term limits." And so I explained to her why I didn't think it would work and why I thought it might not be good, because we would lose a lot of institutional knowledge and people with experience. She said, "Think about this, Joe. If we had term limits, maybe we get one good term out of you." And I said, I couldn't argue, David. I said, "Yeah, you got me. You're right. Maybe people would have the courage that I could count on maybe getting one good term. So every 2 years, I'd have people with courage that would make some votes that would just kind of shock, and somebody's getting very aggressive in leadership style that we have, would basically say, I don't care. This is wrong. I'm not going to do it. And, can't hurt me because I'm not running again.
Yeah.
So I think it's time
we
for
keep
that.
coming back to that. I always say there's a reason profiles encouraged with such a slim volume. It's unusual for politicians to jeopardize their careers by doing things that, they think are right that could cost them their jobs.
Yeah.
Certainly,
Well,
that
I've
is
watched the
one.
political arena. I've watched political votes that destroy. Let me give you first of all, we would not have an immigration problem today. We would have never had this immigration problem if we'd have passed the bill we had, which is a bipartisan Gang of Eight bill, back in 2013. But
You
guess what
got
happened?
68 votes in the United States Senate.
68 votes, and it was going, and I called my friend John Boehner, and I said, John, please put it on the floor. I know it'll vote, John. It'll pass, John. He said, Joe, I can't. I got the far right here. And I said, Eric Cantor just got defeated in a primary in Virginia by a person who was real right-wing and accused him of being for this bill, and that was amnesty. And by God, he had people all wound up against amnesty, and they beat. He said, so I can't get my caucus to go with it. And I'm thinking, oh, my goodness, if we'd have just got that bill passed then, we wouldn't be talking here.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
And then the other one was, well, how about we had as a Dobbs edition, okay, with the whole thing that we're throwing out 50 years of Roe v.
versus
Wade.
Wade, yes.
Yeah, Roe v. Wade. And I'm thinking, you know what? Why don't we just go back and codify Roe v. Wade in the most divided country, the most divided times in our country? Why can't we go back and do something we had 50 years of precedented law and make it the law of the land? Roe v. Wade. And myself, Susan Murkowski, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, we had a bill and we couldn't get it voted on. The Republicans wanted to ban all abortions and Democrats wanted it open, wide open. They wouldn't. I said, and then they tried to both convince themselves, oh, that's what we're doing. We're codifying Roe v. Wade. I said, please don't discard the people of being that ignorant, not understanding what you're writing in this bill. You want to expand it or you want to retract. Roe v. Wade is pretty simple, and that's how we wrote the bill. Couldn't get a vote on it.
Senator Manchin, what do you miss the most about working in the United States Senate, and what do you miss the least?
What I miss the most is sitting in the House when things are very toxic and very tough, and knowing you can reach out to some people because they know that they can reach out to you. You never put a block. I've never campaigned against a sitting colleague. I've never given money to any Democrat running against a sitting Republican running for re-election. I thought it was wrong. And I said, I can't go back and ask that person to work with me after I just gave somebody money or went to their state and campaigned against them. So I thought there should be a violation. I introduced a bill, an ethics violation bill, that you couldn't do that. No one signed on to it. They could care less. So I've just tried everything possible, and I think I could talk to people and get them to talk a little bit more, speak out more publicly about what we think's wrong and see if we could fix it, and have the courage to say, hey, if I lose, I lose. This is not the best job in the world, and my consolation is I get to go home. So,
and what do you miss the least? I guess
I miss the toxic atmosphere back for it because I miss the least of what I saw was good about the process we had up there, and how many smart, good people that when they hit the floor to vote, they didn't have the courage to do what they talked about in the back. I miss that the least because you lose respect. And these are all my friends, and I love them all and I respect them all. They were doing what they thought they had to do, I guess. But they got caught between a rock and a hard place, and they didn't want either one.
What advice do you have for someone thinking of running for office today? And would you advise people to run for office today?
Oh, I would. It's noblest of all professions. You need to run for office. We need to recruit more good people in there. And they've got to say, listen, they ought to go into it with, listen, I'm only going to be there this long. Put a self-imposed term limit on themselves. That's a good sign there. That means they're going in for the right reason, and always basically understand and make the people that you're asking to support you that I will put the country before my party. I will put you before me. And as long as they do that, and when they get there, don't get caught into this thing. We're just trying, citizens all the Citizens United, all the money and everything else. What we've been trying to do, my daughter and I, Heather Manchin, we've been with AmericansTogether.org. If people would just get on that and see where they live and tell them what type of a government they have, tell them how they can get either it's open or it's closed, what they could do, how they can be educated enough to demand more from the people asking for the vote. And I said one thing I would tell every person that's running for office, and I would tell every person that's going to be voting for someone and trying to find out a candidate they like to support, ask them why they want the job. Just point blank, ask them, why do you want the job? If they can't give you an answer, and that answer doesn't satisfy you to where you know they're in it for the right reason. I've always said in West Virginia, they can shake your hand, David, look in your eye and see your soul. That's all they got. They got their gut. They don't have a lot of material stuff, but they sure got good senses. And, it's what you live by.
Let me ask you a question related to that. You described, and you talked a little about it today in the book, some of the trials that you had in your own life and your own family, but also some that you faced as governor, mine disasters and tragedies where you had to look in the eyes and hold the survivors and give them bad news and try and keep their spirits together. So what does that require of a leader?
Let me just tell you right now, and I look at this horrible, tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, okay? And I can tell you, and I've said this publicly on all the airways, Mr. President, we need you to help heal this country. We need you, Mr. President, to be the leader that can heal us, bring us together. I can tell you, I knew when we had those mine disasters back to back to back, there was problems, and it was in the mining laws that we had. I knew I had to change them. But I had people that were losing their fathers, their brothers, their uncles. They were losing their family member. They were losing the breadwinner of their family. They needed my comforting and how I was going to help them get through and get their life back on track. That's what was most needed. That's what this country needs right now. I knew I could fix the mining laws, and I did that. I shut every mine down after that. And I said, we're going to have safety will be the first and foremost thing. I did so many things in safety, in the safety arena to help miners. And I said, the only thing in a workplace in America, there's not a person, David, that goes to work to where they and their family should not expect them to come home safe and sound. Not one. And if we can prevent that from happening, we should. So I gave a hotline people could call in and say, this is what's wrong with our mine. Please help us, because we don't think it's safe. If they were afraid, I had mine companies that stepped up to the plate and said, listen, we have a position in how we run our mines. If any miner sees something unsafe, they can stop production until we fix it. We're not going to put them or their fellow worker in jeopardy. And so we started, but I knew I couldn't do it when I had 29 families that lost 29 loved ones. I knew I couldn't do it when I had 13 that lost 12 loved ones. When there's mining accidents, they needed me to assure them they could continue with their life. They didn't need me to start blaming everybody and fighting each other. And that's what I'm seeing. That's what's got to stop in this country. We have got to stop this radicalism on both sides. And we know what the problem is. Too much information, unfeathered, untested, and no one's held responsible.
Senator, I have so many more things I'd love to ask you about. I know they would as well. I recommend Dead Center in Defense of Common Sense to everybody on this at this meeting through the Zoom. Yeah,
David,
there it is.
This tells it all. This book will tell it all.
I've got it as well here. So, yeah.
That'll tell you exactly how I was able to make some of the toughest decisions because of who I am, where I came from, and how I was raised. Never lost that. And there's a lot of people today that know exactly right from wrong. They just need the courage to do it. And I can tell you, you can live with yourself a lot better doing what you know is right than you can trying to justify what you did wrong.
Senator, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it very much.